Everybody for joining. We appreciate you coming to learn about career and technical education with myself and Colleen McKay. So this is the webinar, Pathways to Self-Sufficiency, Career and Technical Education for Youth with Emotional Disturbances. So I am Marsha Ellison, and here at the Department of Psychiatry at UMass Chan Medical School. I also represent the Transitions to Adulthood Center for Research. Please come and visit our website. You'll see it at the end, and sign up for our newsletter. We have wonderful resources for you all who might be interested in better supporting youth and students with mental health conditions. I am joined today also by Colleen McKay, who is an assistant professor at the Department of Psychiatry and has been working closely with me as a co-investigator on a variety of projects around career and technical education. And Colleen will be joining this participation and speaking with you as well in a little bit. So next, we want to acknowledge the National Institute on Disability and Rehabilitation Research, who has funded the two grants that are really behind this work. One is our Rehabilitation Research and Training Center, the Learning and Working RTC, which focuses on employment and education supports for youth and young adults with mental health conditions, as well as funding from NIDLR for the Translating Evidence to Support Transitions project, which you'll hear about later. I also want to acknowledge our partners, Deanne Unruh and Catherine Fowler at the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, the Collaborative, as well as Kate Creamer and Austin Estes at Advanced CTE. All of these individuals have played a very significant role as we try to make career and technical education available and meaningful for students with mental health conditions. Okay, so briefly, we're going to go through our housekeeping. Just so you know, we are recording this webinar. The recording will be available to you, as will be the slides, and we'll be sending them out to you, so you don't need to ask us. We will send them out to you. We will have a Q&A session at the end of this presentation, so please go ahead and send in your questions in the Q&A button that you see at the bottom of your screen. Ali Murray, who is running the slideshow for us today, will also be handling those questions and giving them to me and Colleen to respond. So please, just as it comes to mind, put your question in the Q&A button there. As you may know, the participants are, everybody is automatically muted right now and your webcams are off. Thank you for the question, Teresa. How long is this presentation? It is scheduled for an hour and a half. So 2:30 to 4. I think that we'll be hitting the Q&A session in about an hour. That gives us plenty of time to handle questions and also to let you jump off if you don't have any questions. So, and we will end early if we need to. Okay, this is Alexandra Murray's email address, alexandra.murray2@umassmed.edu. If you are having problems, please do email her. She'll be checking her email and can handle any technical issues that you may be having. Okay, so we wanted to first begin with a poll to ask you what describes your role or position. So here's a bunch of categories, and please try to select one that fits your role or position best. And you know, that's we're not providing definitions, so just use your best judgment or select other, and we'll take a look at the poll results in just a second. So please go ahead and if you see that on your screen, just respond. And it's very helpful to me and Colleen to know to whom we are talking. And also, as we will see, career and technical education is a topic that involves a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders have a vested interest in CTE for very good reasons that we'll talk about later. Okay, so next, we are going to just briefly review our learning objectives. And yes, so we will be describing the poor post-secondary outcomes of students with emotional disturbance. We'll articulate how career and technical education can improve those outcomes. We are going to spend a bit of time talking about the policy context that's associated with CTE, and then describe strategies that can mitigate barriers to students with emotional disturbance who are trying to access CTE, and as well as their educators and allies. So next is our poll results. So I think, oh, there we go. So like I said, there is a real variety of people who are very interested in CTE, and we certainly appreciate all of your participation in this webinar. Curiously, there are no CTE instructors. So I think that's kind of reflective of where we are at, which is that policymakers, family members, educators, and researchers understand the importance of CTE, but we also need to get into the world of CTE itself, the instructors and the policymakers who are doing CTE, to help them understand and be better prepared to serve students and youth with emotional disturbance or mental health conditions. Okay. So next, let's see, Colleen, can you move that slide? All right. So today we're just going to talk about what is career and technical education, why is it important for students with disabilities, again, as I mentioned, the legislative and policy context, and then we are going to present translating evidence to support transitions, the Test CTE guide that we have developed to help educators prepare and guide students into acquiring and being successful in CTE. So that's our overview, and then I'm going to turn this over to Colleen McKay, who is going to describe the what and why of CTE to you all.
Okay, for some of you, this may be a refresher, others, this may be new information. But career and technical education, or CTE, provides secondary students with technical knowledge, academic and employability skills, and real world experience that ultimately leads to high skill, high wage, in-demand careers. And we'll talk a little bit more as we go through the presentation about in-demand careers, technical knowledge associated with CTE, and so on. Many secondary schools have access to CTE through area CTE centers, which provide a co-located site for students from one or more districts if the school itself is not a career technical education school. What happens in secondary career and technical education programs? Integrated academic and vocational courses, work-based learning experiences in school and in the community. And those could be anything from an apprenticeship or internship to work study, job shadowing, volunteer work, but hands-on work. Linkages to post-secondary education or employment, opportunities to earn certificates in specific career areas. We'll also talk more about that in our presentation today. And then partnerships with local businesses to provide those hands-on work-based learning experiences. So where is and how is CTE available? CTE programs are available in over 98% of public high school districts. Some of those may be through the CTE centers that I just described. Almost 9 million secondary students participated in CTE in the United States in 2018 to 2019. And almost 1 million of these students had a disability status. So a little breakdown here by race and ethnicity of student participation in CTE. This is data from the Perkins Data Explorer for the researchers in the audience. That is a good source for participatory data in CTE. Another great resource is CTE's website, careertech.org. This is a snapshot of participation in CTE in Massachusetts, the state that we happen to be located in. This website under the data section is really interactive, and you can look state by state. You can see up in the upper right-hand corner, there's a thing of compare states. So you could look at your state or other states in the region or across the United States. So how is CTE organized? There is a national career clusters framework that serves as an organizing tool for CTE. These are organized into 16 career clusters that apply to the different high in-demand industries. These career clusters represent 79 different career pathways. Within each cluster, these pathways correspond to a collection of courses and training opportunities that prepare students for greater success in careers. It also provides a structure for organizing and delivering quality CTE programs. It can help learners identify interests, bridge programs of study, and plan for careers, and choose the training and credentials that they will need for a variety of jobs. Within the National Career Clusters Framework, you can see the different clusters listed in bullets here on this page. Each state has these career clusters. This example you're seeing on the screen is from the Minnesota Department of Education. It's really a nice way of, I think, of visualizing the career fields and career clusters, as well as we talk about some of the learning skills associated with career and technical education. You see those kind of in the middle there, you know, critical thinking, other things that you may not see in traditional schools like personal finance, for example. And then around the outside, you see some of the different careers that are within each cluster. And when we talk about a career pathway, we're referring to a sequence of learning experiences that either span secondary and or post-secondary systems. These blend the academic and career technical education instruction, typically offer career guidance and advisement, include the high quality work-based learning experiences, and these activities should culminate in post-secondary education or credentials of value. Career One Stop, careeronestop.org has a nice way of exploring different career clusters. If you have a student or a family member that is kind of curious about job exploration, you can look at the different cluster. It kind of summarizes what is done within that cluster. And it will list different careers that are within that cluster and what types of education might be needed for different careers within the cluster. So whether it's high school education, more advanced training, bachelor's degree, short-term training, apprenticeships, on-the-job learning, and or specific licensing. And when we talk about an in-demand industry, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, or WIOA, defines an in-demand industry or occupation as an industry sector that has substantial current or potential impact on the state, regional, or local economy, and an occupation that currently has or is projected to have a number of positions, including positions that lead to economic self-sufficiency and opportunities for advancement in an industry sector. Look briefly at the legislative context behind career and technical education, including Perkins V legislation, the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, and the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, or WIOA. Perkins V, $1.3 billion annually in funding for provision of CTE in secondary and post-secondary schools. There are some requirements within Perkins V that encourages CTE programs to partner with business and industry, structured courses to meet concentrator status. And when we talk about concentrator status, that is 2 or more courses along a career pathway in career technical education. Recruit special populations, including individuals with disabilities. Conduct a needs assessment to align a high wage, high skill, or in-demand career fields. It also requires states to analyze any gaps in equity and enrollment for special populations, including students with disabilities. Report performance data, also disaggregated by special population status. States must submit plans about how they're going to promote accessibility for disability groups. They also must identify achievement gaps and address racial inequities in access and participation of groups. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act has provisions or mechanisms for assessing students with disabilities for their education needs and eligibility for services under IDEA. Developing an IEP or individualized education program for eligible students. We will talk more about IEPs throughout the presentation. And describing accommodations and educational services needs and plans. Secondary students must have transition services that specify post-secondary goals for education and training and employment in their IEP. This provides a mechanism to connect students with vocational rehabilitation, and transition services can include career and technical education. As you see over on the right-hand side, this is one of our tip sheets on how you can make transition services work for me. There will be links to all of the resources that we talk about today in the slides that will be available to you later. WIOA, or the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, authorizes education and vocational training programs for vulnerable populations, including students with disabilities, requires strategic planning between state agencies for secondary students with disabilities, including career and technical education, provides skill development, employment, and training services through grants to states. State agencies of vocational rehabilitation are required to provide pre-employment transition services or pre-eds to students with disabilities. These services include job exploration, work-based learning experiences, counseling on post-secondary education, workplace readiness training, and self-advocacy training. And you see over on the right-hand side, another one of our resources on WIOA, what families need to know. As Marsha mentioned early in the introductions, we work closely with our partners at Advanced CTE and NTAC-C One of our activities over the past year has been conducting a survey of state CTE directors to better understand how they are serving students with disabilities in CTE. Some of the key takeaways are highlighted here for you on the left-hand side. The Perkins V legislation is fairly new, but states are using it and leveraging it to improve equitable access, success, and outcomes for learners with disabilities in career and technical education. They're also partnering with other state leaders to support learners with disabilities in CTE. However, this engagement does not always translate to direct action. These state-level commitments to learners with disabilities may not be brought to practice on a local level. Many states do not disaggregate CTE data by disability type, even though this information is available through IDEA. Learners with disabilities can access opportunities to earn credentials in high-skill, in-demand industries. However, few states offer interventions, accommodations, or programs that may address their specific needs. Over on the right-hand side, we have a brief based on this survey that will be coming out very soon, within the month. And we will also share this with you as soon as it is ready for distribution. So taking a little closer look at the survey findings, we asked state directors what were their common strategies they used to ensure equitable access, success, and outcomes for learners with disabilities in CTE programs. The survey was sent to all 56 states and territories that are affiliated with advanced CTE. We had responses from 38 states and
rate for an individual is actually below the federal poverty level. Moreover, fewer than 5% of SSI recipients are employed. Over half of them had no income other than SSI. More disturbingly, once youth get onto SSI, youth with emotional disturbances, few get off. In fact, they tend to remain on the disability rolls for an average of 27 years. And accordingly, you see that rates of exit from SSI rolls are lowest among adults with serious mental health conditions, less than 1%. So if you have in mind that, wow, the education outcomes are so poor and the employment outcomes are so poor, then why not rely on disability benefits? Disability benefits do not bring people out of poverty. Employment brings people out of poverty. So that's why we as a center are focusing on employment for youth and young adults with mental health conditions. So one way to get employment is through CTE. So we could go to the next slide. When youth and young adults are, we are not participating or dropping out of high school and college, we have research that shows that what happens after high school is this sad acronym of NEET, not in employment, education, or training. And in this particular research, after high school special education, almost 41% of youth were neither in work nor in school. And somewhat fewer had part-time work, but also no school. So we really wind up with a very large number of youth with mental health conditions who are NEET, not in employment, education, or training. And these are the kinds of outcomes that we are really trying to create new trajectories for these students.
which is what we know is really good practice and effective practice. It does a nice job of helping tackle what can feel like sort of where do I begin?
Test CTE provides resources and steps to take to help students plan a sequence of 4 credits of career and technical education during their high school years to achieve a post-secondary goal of employment in an in-demand and high-wage career.
Each of the pieces within the guide is important, so I would certainly encourage educators to explore the whole guide and really get that sense of what the assessment process is, doing that pre-planning. There's an implementation guide within the guide, and there's lots of resources. There's links to lots of resources and forms and tip sheets and all of those things that are critically important to tackling this really important aspect of transition planning.
You can always reach out to us at the Transitions to Adulthood Center for Research, where you can download the guide for free and also reach out to us personally for technical assistance. We'd be happy to help and provide guidance to you as you embark on this rewarding opportunity for students with emotional disturbances.
I get to do what I love, and I get to earn my own money, to buy my own things, support the economy. This program is helpful a lot for me, and it helps me to help people in my community and to encourage them to try to get into programs like this, because because of their mental illness, they don't think that they can learn. But I try to let people know that no matter what your disability is, you can do it.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that video. We're certainly, as we said, we are very happy to provide technical assistance to you all. And please do come and visit our website and download the guide. We're going to give you a little more detail about what's in this guide in the next couple of minutes. Wait till Colleen gets to the next slide there. So as it was shown, that we provide a roadmap, and this is really meant for special education teachers, educators, or transition coordinators, transition planners in special education who are required to do a transition plan for students with emotional disturbance in their high school. But really, it's relevant to everyone else who is participating in this webinar. If you have a good idea about how your youth or the person that you're advocating for or working with, how to help educators to think about getting CTE in high school. So first of all, we recommend that the youth conduct an assessment and career exploration activities, actually go through all of those career clusters and career pathways and talk about what that means. What would that career be like? And does that fit with that youth? Every transition plan requires that there is a post-secondary goal. But if it's a SMART post-secondary goal, then, and most of you are familiar with that acronym, then that makes it truly more achievable and realistic. We ask and say that there should be a progression of CTE courses that are along a career pathway in high demand industries. So what's important about that is, as many of you probably know, is that there's a great deal of stigma about CTE. Most high schools, and we talk to young adults who are on our advisory boards, they go through high school and it's all about college prep. And if you're not, I did see a comment earlier in the Q&A section about how there's less CTE available now than there was before Perkins V, which is really the opposite of what Perkins V is supposed to be doing. But that may have to do with the fact that there is such an emphasis on college prep lately. But college prep is not for everyone, and especially for students with mental health conditions, an alternative to more and more academic coursework may be the best way for them to actually get jobs. And the jobs that we are trying to propose, and Perkins V stresses also, are jobs that are in demand for that locale and that are high wage, and are not the typical shop classes that people might have a stigma about CTE. That is shop classes that lead to low wage entry level jobs. We say in the CTE guide, we suggest that there are supports in the IEP and other activities that can reinforce CTE learning. And that also naturally, young people are young and they will need to reassess their career goals and CTE course progression as they move forward. So in our next slide, we identify these particular steps to develop and earn 4 credits of CTE. Educators and family members and employment specialists should review the CTE classes that are available. Collaborate with CTE teachers. Like I said in the beginning, we didn't have any CTE teachers here. CTE teachers are not that accustomed to working with students with mental health conditions or students with disabilities more broadly. You'll need to collaborate with them to help them to understand the nature of the disability and ways in which they can be supportive in their CTE classes. Talk with family members, share class descriptions, and then, as I said, identify a progression of 4 credits of CTE. Arrange for a workplace experience. Have students take a look and participate in an experience of a job. Make sure that the coursework is specifically stated in the student's IEP. It's not enough to simply say, we're going to prepare students for a STEM career, but actually say what are the 4 courses that are needed. Monitor the selection of the courses, and also if you are involved with the education system, participate in trying to align the curriculum within the school and the district and the state, so that there is a cohesion of working together to try to make CTE and employment an outcome for these students. I just saw Marianne Moore's comment, who was talking to students with mental illnesses. It's a very good question. We do know that only between 11 and 13% of students with mental health conditions in high schools are identified for special education. So there's a whole universe of students with different kinds of mental health conditions who are not being identified for special ed and are not accessing the resources that could be available to them. But on the other hand, there are individualized learning plans in many states and high schools, and guidance counselors that can be used to think about CTE for students, irrespective of being in special education. A little bit more about how to make CTE a reality for students with mental health conditions. First of all, you really need to address stigma of CTE classes. Students with, as I said, with mental health conditions may well feel like, this is for dumb kids. This is for students who can't go to college. To try to address that stigma, it would be helpful to view the career clusters and view their pay rates. Help students understand that a certificate in in an in-demand industry actually leads to really good pay and good benefits. Also, taking CTE in high school will allow some students to use their certificates and their expertise to pay for college later. As they go through college, they can use their certificates to help support themselves and support their education. You want to solve barriers such as transportation or cost for uniforms or other kinds of things. As an educator or ally of a student with mental health condition, help them figure out, how do I get to that work-based learning experience? How can I get to that area CTE high school where I can get that coursework? Address the executive functioning challenges that students with mental health conditions face, and do that within the context of the school day. Okay, what else can we do? So one of the things that we heard from instructors and CTE is that students with mental health conditions, as many of you well know, may have a lot of absences. There may be hospitalizations. There may be periods where they don't come to school. And for CTE, especially when it's when the certificate of that program requires a certain number of hours of participation in the classroom, that can be a real barrier to students. Well, what can you do about that? You need to arrange for strategies to make up missed classroom hours. Open the lab and workshop at additional times of day. Could be like after traditional school hours, the CTE instructor may be willing to be there and allow the student with mental health conditions who are having difficulties being in a classroom with other people to come and work their hours, their needed hours at that time. If you can, try to use measures of competency rather than time units for some of these certificates. And provide online coursework and give attendance credit for time spent on time, spent online trying to achieve those credits. Reach out to the CTE instructors at the start of the semester to plan for addressing attendance issues that you can predict may come up later on. We at the Transitions to Adulthood Center for Research talk a fair amount about providing outside the box accommodations. So we have flexible attendance policies, as we just mentioned. There are a number of other accommodations rather than going through the very standard list of note-taking and extra time for tests. There are other accommodations that really can make a difference for students with mental health conditions. Additional individual time to preview the classwork. If you can get the instructor to do that ahead of time, that will reduce anxiety. It will help focus the person, the student or the youth on what the work is that's going to be presented. So in that way, addressing the executive challenges that they face. Some students need preferential seating. Sometimes that's in the front, sometimes that's in the back. We suggest no participation expectations. Rather than giving points for participating, don't do that for a student with a mental health condition who may have some real trouble, anxiety or panic attacks about trying to speak up in class. Provide a safe space to relax if a student is anxious. Give them the opportunity to take a break and let them step out of the class without penalties. We have a tip sheet on the right side on how to provide college accommodations that apply as well to students in high school. So please do come to our website and take a look at our tip sheets. They may be helpful. Other supports for students with mental health conditions for CTE. As I mentioned with the CTE instructor, we want to discuss the student's strengths and needs, prepare them for what might be behavioral strategies and possible triggers in the classroom that the CTE instructor can use and rely on. Explore possible accommodations and contingency planning for absences. With the student, you might visit the CTE class ahead of time. We find that for many students with mental health conditions, it's really important to build hope for a future career and higher education, help them to develop a vocational identity. Many of these students don't have role models in family members who have successful careers, and it's important to try to work with them to understand that, hey, yeah, I can work, and hey, yeah, I can get paid, and I can be a contributing member to society and the economy. We think that peer mentors or some kind of go-to person at the class or the work site will be very helpful for students with mental health conditions. We also urge to use that teach self-advocacy in the pre-ETS curriculum. That's if your school is not doing that, urge them to develop that curriculum and get self-advocacy training for students with mental health conditions. Okay, next slide. As I mentioned, students themselves need to be encouraged to take CTE and face and deal with the stigma that they might have. We have this tip sheet here, School That Makes Sense, taking CTE courses. This is directed towards students. It's written for them. And please come to our website. You can download it and distribute that to your students who might be thinking about CTE and have questions about its relevance for them. Strategies to reduce anxiety are described in the TEST CTE guide. This is, I don't think, new to a lot of people, but it's helpful. Encourage relaxation techniques, provide peer support, prepare the student for the situation. As we said, let them visit the CTE class, have some idea what it's like before they get in there, and praise small accomplishments. That will help a student to move forward with their CTE. And next slide. So we've put in here a TEST CTE success story. Our guide was piloted in 2 states, in Maine and Connecticut, in a handful of high schools and special educators. And we asked them, how did it go? Did it actually work? So we have one story from an educator who used the TEST CTE guide. They had a student who was interning at a screen printing company, but the company had to shut down. So the educator then worked with the student and the CTE center at the school to get another screen printing internship. And this one was a paid internship. The student worked there twice a week for 4 hours each day. The internship went well, and the student felt like, this is the kind of work I would like to do. The educator believed that the business owner was impressed with the previous skills that the student had developed, and the student was excited that they got paid. The internship ended with his upcoming graduation, but post-graduation paid employment with that screen printing company was being considered. So how did that work? So we asked about the supports that were used. There were weekly check-ins. A journal outlined everything that the student learned that day or that week. And there were weekly quizzes on what he had learned, created by the supervisor at the job. He also revised his resume and cover letter. They did mock interviews. And over time, the supports for the student slowly phased out. And that individual began to feel independent in the work and encouraged to try to get a job at that company after graduation. Okay. So I also have a couple of slides here on stackable or micro credentials. This strategy is not in the TEST CTE guide. It's something that we, Colleen and I, came to learn about after the guide. But we think it's very usable and important for students with emotional disturbance and other disabilities as well. So what is a stackable credential? It's when a credential, and by that we mean a certificate in a certain occupation. A stackable credential is when there is a sequence of credentials and steps that can be accumulated over time to build the individual's qualifications and help them to move along the career pathway to potentially higher paying jobs. So what that means is that, for example, if you are in a career pathway to become a CNA, a certified nursing assistant, rather than the single credential after testing and the many hours of supervision and learning that are required to get a CNA, but there could be steps along the way to getting a CNA. Smaller, what we call micro credentials, as they move along and have learned different parts of the job, they can get that micro credential. And that can be very helpful for students with mental health conditions who are in and out of their education program. The micro credential is a reinforcement and something that they can feel proud of, that they have achieved this far, and that they can then move along and get these other credentials and or badges towards the actual certificate. So stackable credentials are being used in a couple of states now, and if you are in the position to be able to advocate for that in your state, please do. We think it's a helpful strategy for students with mental health conditions. Okay, we're just about to wrap up, and then we can take some questions. I want people to know that Colleen and I are very busy trying to get additional research to conduct on test CTE. We did get funding from Mathematica and the Office of Disability Employment Policy in the Department of Labor to talk about what would be next steps for test CTE. This white paper is available on this website. If you want to think about how to move CTE for students with emotional disturbance, how to move that forward, please do take a look at this white paper that we have available. Okay, please contact, that's my email address up there. You will all get the slides, and stay informed. Please get our newsletter. We have lots of information and resources available to you as you are working with youth and young adults with mental health conditions in terms of their employment and education. Plus, we have very active social media handles, so we encourage you to visit our social media sites and follow us and like us, and we will like you back. So thank you for that. Okay, I am going to stop now and let Allie Murray pose some questions to myself and Colleen and see if we can be helpful to you in the next 20 minutes.
All right, so we do have a question on, is there information on what types of accommodations were most effective?
I think that I don't have data on what accommodations are most effective. What was reported to us as the biggest challenges were attendance policies and students who had anxiety. And so that's why we tried to develop these different responses to how to address attendance and anxiety. So those were the two most significant ones that we tried to address. But it's still, the question is still out there, whether the strategies we are proposing are effective, and we do hope to have future research to see if we're right.
Okay, where would someone find out if stackable credentials are available in their state?
I'm going to pop that over to Colleen, see if she has a good idea.
There is, and we'll make sure we pop a link into the presentation before we send it out. But Advanced CTE does have some information about stackable credentials on their website. I don't know of one specific site that would have them for every state, but we'll see what we can find and include before we send the slides out.
Thank you. And we have a bit of a multi-tiered question. This is in reference to the survey of state directors. Someone is wondering if New Jersey was one of the states that was surveyed. They're receiving a targeted technical assistance from NTAC on this topic, and they'd like to bring the information back to the core group. They're also wondering if specific disabilities were being tracked, what's the next step after CTE, how much support is being provided in these programs, is the curriculum being modified, and what are their abilities to complete the program?
So every state and territory affiliated with advanced CTE was asked to complete the survey. In terms of next steps, we will be doing a state model case study with a handful of states to look more in depth on things like accommodations, professional development, and what other resources states might be using. And we'll be undertaking that throughout this year.
Colleen, do you know offhand if New Jersey was one of the respondents?
I do not. Ali asked me about that. I would have to go back and look at this point.
Okay.
That is certainly something we can answer later.
And you spoke about barriers to collaborating with special education. Do you have any ideas onto how to improve that collaboration between CTE and special education to better support students? Was that a part of your research?
Well, I would say to some degree, yes. The states that were successful in collaborating with special education, CTE and special education, did some things jointly together on the local level, like professional development. So there were a number of states that created curricula in which CTE instructors and special educators needed to both go through in order to learn about students with disabilities and what it means to accommodate them and how to encourage their access and success in CTE. Disaggregating data is important for CTE to understand whether or not they are serving students with in special education well. Are they accessing them? And it gives an opportunity to talk with special education about who are their students and can they, would they be appropriate for CTE? Would they be interested in CTE instruction? So there are some strategies that that we recommend and would be available in our brief, which is Colleen said is forthcoming. And we'll be happy to share that brief, the link to that brief with participants in this webinar once it's published.
We had a question.
Colleen, I don't know if there are some other thoughts that you had about how to collaborate better with special education.
I would just reinforce the comments that you made that, you know, in the survey, we saw that that was happening at the state level, but that it doesn't always happen at the local level. And I think that's also true for collaboration, not only with CTE and special education, but also vocational rehabilitation. So, you know, getting all of the players at the table to support students.
Just one more thought comes to mind. You know, the WIOA requires a strategic plan in which other partners like education are expected to participate in the larger employment strategies. So, but as Colleen said, even if that's written into the WIOA strategic plan, that doesn't mean it's happening on the local level. And that's where we'd like to see some of these professional development and looking at data and sharing data on the local level would be more effective. Sorry, Ali, please go ahead.
It's okay. We had a recent question come in about would youth apprenticeships be something to look at? also community college workforce. And then someone else asked if you had explored pre-apprenticeships.
We did not explore pre-apprenticeships. I will say, however, that we're not engaged in this research, but the Office of Disability Employment Policy, ODEP, in the Department of Labor, has a lot of resources about apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships for students with disabilities. And there's really a lot of work going on in that area. We think it's great, so we totally support that. And as I said, please do visit ODEP. Also, there's an organization, Cape Youth, who is working with ODEP on pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships. So that's a very fruitful area to work on. So I definitely support that. What else?
All right, so since we know that guidance counselors are often pushed to emphasize college versus CTE and career readiness, do you have any plans to provide similar CTE information to them? Perhaps you could work with a pilot state or with the National Association of School Counselors?
Colleen, maybe you want to speak to our thoughts about different modules for test CTE?
Sure. So, our thinking is that, the current test CTE is geared towards special educators, but we're thinking that test CTE could easily be expanded to include modules for other stakeholders, family members, how to do, work with these agencies and advocate for students, navigating and asking and seeking accommodations, those types of things. Certainly other stakeholders and groups that might be involved, the players around the table, we could have modules for them too.
I do think that guidance counselors are a very important stakeholder group for that 80% of youth with mental health conditions who are not in special education. CTE is a viable road for them to employment and to graduation. But we have to work with the guidance counselors, I think, and possibly the school psychologists to make that a reality for them. So I fully agree with that point.
Someone is wondering if you would be able to comment on the need for coursework in soft skills.
Yes, I think that's essential. There are some curricula that are out there. One comes to mind, Skills to Pay the Bills, produced by the Department of Labor. There are soft skills trainings for young adults with mental health conditions, and those things can be adapted for the classroom. So this is work that is yet to be done. I think it's a very critical piece myself.
Are there any effective strategies in helping engage transition-age youth and motivate them to participate in this process?
I mean, some of the strategies we mentioned, I think I was once had a mental health provider talk about when if you want to talk about what they want to do, and then they might come up with some hard to achieve ideas like I want to be the next rap star. You can use that motivation to actually sort of explore the variety of jobs that go into being a rap star, and sound and music and the writing and the publicizing and the merchandising and all of the the whole array of things that happen with developing a music star. So, and when you talk about those things, you can use the career pathways to talk about, okay, well, how do you actually get there? And how much money does it make? And what is it going to get you if you are able to achieve that? So that's an engagement tool. We mentioned peer mentors. We do think that other youth who have gone through CTE, who are working in an industry and can show themselves as a role model, will be very effective for youth. Pretty much talk about money and talk about how much you can earn working at a fast food industry versus if you can actually sort of put your lives together and proceed along a career pathway and become a certified nursing assistant, and then maybe higher education after that to become a practicing nurse, a registered nurse. Some ideas.
And I would add to that, encouraging youth to be an active part of the IEP process. So we've heard from youth that know they have an IEP, but not really fully understand why they have one or how it might be used.
Yeah, speaking of that, one of the other test guides is on encouraging students to take a leadership role in their IEP, which is also evidence-based, as when students are participating as leaders in their IEP meetings, that does also lead to better employment outcomes and post-secondary education outcomes. If you visit the test page on our website, you will see the guide for leading your IEP. That's, self-advocacy is an engagement tool as people learn what's around them, like, what is this IEP? What is it about? What does it get me? And how can I use it to my advantage? That becomes a successful engagement strategy.
All right, this one's a bit more open-ended. Future research directions.
Well, I mean, literally, as Colleen said, we are thinking about other modules for other stakeholders who are interested in getting CTE working for students with mental health conditions. We also are submitting as researchers to do an efficacy trial, which means while we did pilot test CTE, we want to actually do some hard research on outcomes and implementation. If you actually do this guide and students get 4 credits of CTE, will we see them getting employment or post-secondary education after high school, improved graduation rates, and so forth? So those are some of the concrete steps ahead of us. As Colleen mentioned, our immediate next step is to do case studies in states where they are effectively using CTE for students with mental health conditions. And we want to document that, how they did it, what strategies did they use, what outcomes and what data do they have. So that'll be forthcoming in the next year or two. So please visit our website and stay tuned. How are we doing, Allie?
I think we're good on questions. Oh wait, we got one more. Here in Washington, students can take CTE classes in high school and also at a career development center in the area in 11th and 12th grade in various career areas. However, the slots available in the CDC are limited and students who have behavior issues, some with emotional disabilities, don't get in. What advice would you have to increase availability? Are states required to maintain records of students who apply and their rationales for selection? What do they need to get in, essentially?
So states should have data on who is participating in CTE. I think the other piece, you know, we touched a little bit about this today, but professional development for educators around working with students with disabilities, how those accommodations, you know, what is needed, what those might look like, and how students with disabilities can be successful in CTE. And then, as we've also touched on, the collaboration between CTE, special education, and vocational rehabilitation at the local level.
Yeah, I'll also jump in and say that, you know, that there is a reluctance among CTE educators and CTE program directors to accept students with behavioral conditions. And, you know, and that's a form of discrimination that is illegal, but is a reality. Which is why we are encouraging that there is collaboration between special ed and CTE to try to address some of these internalized reluctance around serving students with behavioral health conditions. Talk about the strengths, talk about accommodations, and also just to say that Perkins V requires states to look at their enrollment data. And if there is, they are required to provide access of CTEs to students with disabilities and other vulnerable populations. So thank you, Marianne. I'm actually looking at your chat right now, that CTE programs are reviewed on a regular basis so that the selection process does not violate civic rights. So that is the conundrum that we are facing, that there are these barriers to students with behavioral conditions to getting into CTE that need to be addressed. Okay, I'm going to take that as a moment to wrap up. So, oh, thank you, Pamela. Let's see. When CTE instructors have support for students with disabilities, they are among the very best educators of these students. I totally agree. We heard from students in our Young Adult Advisory Board, you know, over and again, you know, a regular academic class was not for me. I just couldn't sit still and give me an opportunity to do hands-on learning. And this was great and meaningful and made me want to stay in school. So, yeah, so thank you all for sticking with us for the hour and a half. It was a pleasure to present this work to you, and we look forward to continuing to communicate with you.